My name is Garret Hohl. My background in education was biostatistics and analytical chemistry. Started my own website called HockeyGraphs, which is now the #1 independent source for hockey research and analytics. And from there, I gained opportunities to consult for individuals, and hockey data kind of evolved naturally from those opportunities. So HockeyData is both a data tracking and consulting company. So we do both player tracking, team tracking, and also analysis, depending on our individual clients' needs. So we'll track games, look at statistics from video. We'll track prepackaged statistics that were maybe designed by us. These are things that we think are important, and we'll look at them. Or sometimes there'll be special projects where teams have certain things that they would like to be looked at, and we'll look at those things for them. Right now we're currently in discussion with, I believe, 8 or 9 NHL teams in regards to moving forward with them through their AHL franchises. So there's a lot of public data available in the NHL level, but public or proprietary, there's not much in the AHL. Mostly because of the fact that there's just not much drive for or competition in terms of doing that. So what we've done is we've started offering to these teams the possibility of tracking for their farm team, so they can get a better idea of what their prospects are doing, how they're performing, and also trying to see if they can find untapped talent over in the AHL. Well, in terms of collecting, we usually track through video, depending on the situation. So we get video, whether that's from public feeds or if that's given to us through the team. And then we have 2 trackers to watch over the data. And the reason why we do 2 trackers is, even though it increases the costs for us as a company, what it does is it allows us to increase accuracy by removing both bias and error. The reasoning for that is what it does is it reduces that possibility that your own human nature and your own human biases can cause the data to be skewed. And data is only as good as the way that you're recording them. In terms of amateur players, a lot of it tends to side from the defensive side of the game. I mean, it really can vary depending on the individual, depending on their own talent and their own skill sets. Everyone's kind of unique, but for the most part, we look at multiple different things. We'll look at both outcome statistics, a player's output, like how are they performing, but we can also look at the more micro statistics and the reason why players are performing the way they are, whether that's their breakouts, whether it's their zone entries, whether they're shooting too much from one side versus the other, if they're not working hard enough to get in the sweet spots in terms of shooting. And so it can depend on the player, but for the most part, I find at the amateur level, there's not as much focus on the defensive game, as opposed to when you look at the pro level, there's almost too much focus on the defensive side of the game, which sometimes will choke out some of the offense. At the pro level, while some of it is difficult to differentiate between the player and also systems, due to pro level being a lot more systems based, one thing we do find is sometimes, as I said, like offense is sometimes choked out by defense. Players will sometimes play a little overly safe, and what that does is that it ends up hurting them in the long run, because they end up hurting themselves in certain situations where if they pushed, while it might not work out in the very specific situation, on the long run they'll end up gaining more than they hurt. A lot of that we can find, for example, with zone entries. We've noticed that a lot of times players will defer to dumping the puck and chasing after it. Part of the reasoning is because they're afraid of losing the puck, but in many ways dump is just a more preferential version of possession loss. Well, one of the things that makes us different is flexibility. A lot of companies, they work with their individual things. This is what they track, this is what they do, this is what we can offer you. We have those things as well, but what we also offer is we offer the ability to be flexible and customizable towards their that team's needs. We've also worked with tracking prospect stats for teams that want to look at the top prospects in terms of the NHL draft. And so that flexibility is one thing. And the other thing is our price point tends to be extremely lower than the competition. In fact, we tend to be just as comparable or even better costs than some teams that use in-housing when they have their own trackers that track data. Right now, a lot of video tracking is extremely expensive due to the large amount of training that you have to do in training machine learning algorithms, which means that there's still a lot of manual labor in terms of even the automated systems. And so because of that, we still end up having a lower workload and labor costs.